Hello, Mr. Mayhem. It's great to have you on the meet with us. So far, I have already explained to the session viewers what MetaBrainz is all about and what you are all about. Yeah, in your own words, maybe you could start by giving a short introduction about yourself, maybe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. Let's see. The MetaBrainz originally was all about MusicBrainz, and MusicBrainz is more or less IMDb or the Wikipedia for music. And as a very important project over the last 20 years, it's now being used by many companies on the internet and around the world. But that was just the first project, and MetaBrainz was the organization that was created to basically run and house this project. So, and we have other projects such as ListenBrainz and BookBrainz, and BookBrainz is Wikipedia. Is basically MusicBrainz for books, and ListenBrainz is basically the Last.fm project, but open source. So
Yes.
we always believe in open data and complete transparency in everything that we do in open source. So in very brief terms, that's what we do.
That's great to hear. So, when was MetaBrainz started again?
So the MusicBrainz project was actually started in 2000. There was a precursor project to the CD index in 1998. And
Yeah.
the foundation was actually created in 2004.
Yeah, I was working on some code the other day for the MusicBrainz bot, and I was seeing some code from 1998, and I was like totally surprised because I myself was born in 2002.
Yes, that's from the precursor project from 98.
Yeah. So maybe if you had to restart your open source journey and start an organization from scratch, how would you do it today?
I wouldn't actually change a lot. I think the CD index project that I created, I had no idea what open source was about, how to deal with communities. And so I was completely raw and fresh, and it completely went off the rails right away. People were shouting at each other, people were really rude, and it was not a nice place to be. So a couple of years later, when the .com crash came, I had to choose, do I sell my fancy Roadster and work on MusicBrainz, or do I keep my Roadster, move to the Bay Area, and then work for somebody else's dream at Google or some such? I decided to go sell my Roadster. Oh, such a beautiful car.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and then actually work on MusicBrainz. And but really, at that point when I decided to start MusicBrainz, I said, and I learned these really important lessons about how not to do it. So I would start with a better understanding of communities and how they work and how to actually build a community where people are nice to each other. Because nowadays we've actually arrived at the point where I think the MusicBrainz community is one of the few communities that actually is very polite, or at least attempts to be very polite in the world. And I think that's also shown in our summer of code students. When they come in, everyone's given a fair chance, which is something that I'm very proud of. My team can give a chance.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for that because in both of my attempts, like last year, this year, Rio, I have had excellent experience with both of my mentors. So yeah, super thanks for that.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, so just like me, a lot of my fellow students are also interested in working with open source projects, but they are as students, they are pretty scared of the huge code bases. So maybe you could give them advice on how to navigate those huge code bases and how to start with your first contribution, maybe.
Okay, I think one of the first things to do is to actually engage the community. I mean, okay, that's the thing that works for MetaBrainz. It may not work for other projects. But if you have a new contributor that comes in and they would like to have information about a particular project, it's best to ask direct questions. And rather than, hey, I'm a new contributor, what should I do? What do we do with that question, right? It's better if a person comes into the channel and says, hi, I'm so-and-so. I would like to work on this feature, but I don't know where to find the code. I'd like to do this. Could somebody please help me? And the chances are that somebody, because we know the code base, right, is going to take us 30 seconds to figure out, like, okay, look at this, look at that, look at this, right? So engaging the community is much, much better, because engaging the community is much better than just trying to muddle your way through on your own, right? Also, sometimes you can come into a project and not know anything about it, and he's like, I want to contribute things, but it turns out that that project has already been working on these things, and you don't know it. So you might spend a week working on something, you're ready to submit a PR, and then the project goes like, oh no, we've already worked on this, and then your week's work is gone, right? So it's really best if you can actually engage the community before you really start working. It's very, very important for Summer of Code. And I think I'm going to jump ahead to one of your questions a little bit down the road and talk about that.
Sure.
What are the don'ts of applying for a GSoC project? So this has been a topic with us because we have a lot of projects that need UI work, so React work, but the React work is sort of looks, oh, I need to know React. It was like, well, no, you need to learn JavaScript, you need to know React, you need to know HTML, and you need to know CSS, and you need to be able to be reasonably competent at them, right?
Yeah.
So especially if you were trying to apply for a UI or UX focused project at GSoC, make sure you actually spend time, one, your skills are up to snuff, and two, make sure you actually spend time getting familiar with it. What we had, what we're seeing with Summer of Code as of late is that we have students that turn up with 3 days until the deadline, and they are just pounding as fast as they can to try and get something in before the submission deadline. But oftentimes that doesn't actually work because there's too much work that needs to be done before you can actually submit a proposal. And if you don't submit a proposal, or if you're not ready to submit the proposal, or you just submit one that's completely half-baked, you're not going to get accepted. Yeah, other tips, some do's. Definitely get in touch with your community as soon as possible. Last time we had so many people that turned up in the very last minute, and we had one person who's like, oh, please give me a chance, please give me a chance, please, 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 please. But he decided to pick on this really large project, and had 3 days to whip out a proposal, and we just told this person, like, look, it's not going to work, right? So give yourself time. Yeah. And another advice is don't fight your mentor or potential mentors, right? If your mentor says no, that's not going to work, don't argue with your mentor. That's just bad form because you're only going to upset your mentor, right? So that's not particularly good. And always be honest. Right? If you're trying to bullshit somebody or lie or something like that, we can see through that right away. We've seen all of this stuff before. So honesty and transparency are really, really important, and we value that. We can see these things in an applicant. So those are my primary tips.
Yeah, definitely. I myself recommend my friends to always start the preparation right from January at least.
Yes.
So the application starts somewhere around March, I think, and starting around January gives them enough time to learn some new technologies if needed. I myself spent quite some time, a few weeks, just setting up MusicBrainz Docker. So you can just show up 3 days before the deadline and then try to get in.
I mean, turning up in March is ideal, but not everyone has that kind of time. But if you give 3 days to applying for Summer of Code, do yourself a favor. Just take 3 days off, go do something else, because you're not going to get your application in.
Definitely.
All right, next question.
Sure. So as an executive director of and leading open source project, how do you balance community-driven contributions with the need for structured development and project direction? I'm not completely aware of it, but as I can see in MetaBrainz, we are doing a lot of work with hired folks that work continuously on the projects, and then there's there's contributions that are coming from the community. So how do you manage that basically?
Yeah, this is very tricky. This is a classical difficult problem in open source to have both paid contributors and unpaid contributors, and to keep everything structured and moving in the right direction. Now, they're generally speaking two different types of open source projects. There's one that sits aside a corporation where the corporation's got some task and they have an adjunct that does open source, right? And those types of projects tend to have a harder time to get more people into the community, because if they feel that this is just an adjunct of this organization, and their efforts may not be appreciated, that's a really tough sell. The way it works at MetaBrainz is open source and open data is our mission. That's what we do, right? So there isn't a secondary mission that we've got going on. We're all kind of moving in the same direction, trying to do the same things. But even then, even in such an organization, there are a number of tasks that are the different types of tasks that are to be done are in different, what I call the fun scale, right? So the funnest things are always going to be done by volunteers because, like, hey, there's a fun coding project, let me jump in, right? But there's so many not fun projects, right? Right now we're doing an OAuth revamp that we need to have an OAuth move from MusicBrainz to MetaBrainz, and it has a lot of moving parts, and there's absolutely nothing sexy about it. Right? It is just a chore, and it's very complicated, and it's security driven, and this is not fun code, right? You're not going to get volunteers to work on this, right? This is where the paid people are going to be working on this, right? So the paid people tend to work on the things that are less fun, or the things that are just mission critical. We need to do this in order to keep the servers running, and volunteers tend to work on the things that they want to work on, right? And then there's also with that, volunteers are going to flake constantly, right? Whereas your contractors, they want to get paid, so they don't flake as much, right? So that's more or less sort of division of labor that we've been working with, but I see a lot of other open source projects struggling with this. So I think our transparency, including financial transparency, and just being a wholly 100% open source, open data organization, makes this considerably easier for us.
Yeah, definitely. And I can already feel that in the community, and I personally really appreciate that.
Yes.
So thanks for that. So we have another question, like for someone who is new to open source, what advice would you give them to find a project that aligns with their interests and skill levels? Like, that's basically.
That's interesting. There are many projects out there, and one of the things I've learned is that projects and technologies have, I don't know, it's a hype cycle, a popularity cycle, right? So one of the things that we're finding is that nobody wants to write Perl code anymore. So Perl code for the MusicBrainz project, we're having a really hard time attracting people. And for other projects, you know, if it's React or machine learning stuff or AI, we would get thousands of applicants for one particular idea, right? So these kinds of ideas take many different layers, and also the applicants that are coming in bring a whole lot of skill levels with them, right? So it can be really challenging to try and figure out what aligns, but I wonder if the question is a good one, because it's not so much important. I mean, it is important to match skill level and interests, right? But I think those are because a person can see, it's like, oh, I like to work with music, right? And I hate accounting, so I'm not going to go work on an open source accounting project, but I'll work on something music. So I think that part is easy. By the time you find an organization like MetaBrainz, you probably already know a little bit about what we're about, right? I think the better question to ask in this particular context is, can you find the right community? Can you find the right mentors? Can you find the people that are willing to help you and so forth, right? So I think, and it's my impression, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that MetaBrainz is an organization that is very open and forthcoming. And if people are earnest about listening to our feedback, I think we can really teach people some very valuable lessons. And I think you've been a great example in that. You had a very successful summer code project last year. And we're now using the data from that. So that was really fantastic. And you know, we had multiple people helping out in this particular project, right? So I think this was the exact right community, the exact right mentors. So I think when students are coming into a project for open source, find first the project that appeals to you, then find an idea that appeals to you, and then verify that the community is actually intact, right? If you don't get any traction, nobody answers you, and you're just off on your own, it's probably best to find a different project.
Yes, and I can definitely again vouch for that as well. Like I was finding some last.fm related stuff online, and then I just randomly came across MusicBrainz. So that's how I actually, even got to know about MusicBrainz, and then got to know that it's an open source community, then I should go and contribute. So yeah, you just let's say you like um, maybe working on something else like map, or you like machine learning, you could go contribute to scikit-learn maybe. So yeah, first your passion and then the community.
Okay.
And as you said, finding the right mentors. I was really lucky to find the right mentors at the
Yes,
right time.
yes. We've been really lucky finding some very good students. And
Yeah,
one of the things that MetaBrainz has been very, very good at as well is identifying the really good students, and when possible, and it's obviously not always possible, fortunately,
Mhm.
but we prefer to hire our former GSoC students because we know exactly how
Yeah,
they work. We understand them, right? So
exactly.
Kartik is definitely a former GSoC student. Akshat is a former
Yes,
GSoC student. So at bitmapping as well. So we've got a number of people that have been the former GSoC students, and
even bitmap.
it makes the hiring process so much easier, right? So it's really
Wow.
fantastic that way. But I
Yeah,
think,
bitmap is pretty high up in the community. Like that really shows your dedication to hire from the student community as well.
yeah, oh, I wouldn't
That's
hire
excellent.
a person that I don't know how they program, right? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yes, that's just excellent.
But I think we're nearly out of time, no? Or should we attempt another question? What do you think?
Yeah, maybe you could take one last short question. Like, would you like to give any message to young coders or open source maintainers?
Uh,
Anything?
to give what? Sorry?
Would you like to give a message to young coders or open source maintainers?
Hmm.
Like whatever that needs to be heard across the community.
Hmm. Advice I'd give. Listen to your mentors. Find the right mentors. And work intelligently. Don't work hard. So if you get stuck on something, go ask for some help. That's what your mentors is there for, right?
Yes.
I've seen so many people that come in and like, oh, I don't want to ask, I don't want to appear stupid, and then spend hours working on things that could have been answered by a question that takes 5 minutes to answer. So, in a nutshell, I think that will be my advice to them.
Yeah, I should have heard this advice like last year, I think.
Yeah.
I personally spent a lot of time like figuring things out myself, whereas my mentor could have just said, "No, just don't do this, do that, and it should be solved."
Yes. Exactly.
So yeah,
Good.
um, excellent. So that was definitely a lot of fun. I hope our viewers enjoyed all the answers. So yeah, thank you for joining us, Mayhem.
Yep.
It was pretty nice to have you.
Okay. Thank you for having
Yeah.
me. Bye. Good luck. Bye
Yes.
bye.
Thanks for joining.